Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're building in Minecraft while I tell you about someone who was forced to live with their ex after a messy breakup and what they discovered during those 3 months destroyed any chance of peace between them. Before we dive in, a massive thank you to everyone who keeps watching, commenting, and supporting the channel. It truly means a lot. Let's keep the momentum going. So, our narrator had just gone through a brutal breakup with Sarah, and thanks to Elise, neither of them could afford to break alone. They were stuck sharing an apartment for 3 more months. At first, it was tense and miserable, until Sarah suddenly started acting way too normal, like she wanted him to see how fine she was. And that's when things started to feel seriously off. So there I was, standing in the doorway of what used to be our apartment, keys still warm in my hand, staring at the reality I couldn't escape for another 3 months. The breakup with Sarah had been brutal. Screaming matches, slammed doors, the whole nightmare. But the lease didn't care about our feelings, and neither of us could afford to break it without tanking our credit scores. We were stuck, roommates in the worst possible timeline. The first few days were exactly as awkward as you'd imagine. We moved around each other like ghosts, barely making eye contact, communicating through passive-aggressive post-it notes on the fridge. But then something shifted. Sarah started acting almost normal. Too normal, actually. She'd smile when we passed in the hallway, make small talk about her day, even offered to pick up milk when she noticed we were running low. It felt like she was auditioning for the role of mature adult who handles breakups with grace. And honestly, it creeped me out. She started leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she showered. She'd take phone calls in the living room instead of her bedroom, laughing loudly, making sure I could hear how totally fine and moved on she was. It was performative in a way that made my skin crawl, like she needed me to see her thriving. And sure, part of me wondered if this was just her way of coping, of showing herself she could survive without me. But another part of me, the part that had learned not to trust her easy smiles, knew something else was happening. About 2 weeks into our forced cohabitation, I started noticing the signs. She was getting ready more carefully, spending extra time on her makeup, wearing perfume on random Tuesday nights. She'd leave the apartment around 8 and come back after midnight, humming to herself, glowing in that specific way people do when they're falling into something new. And look, I wasn't jealous. We were done. If she wanted to see someone else, that was her business. I just wanted to survive the next 70-something days without any more drama. Then, one evening, I walked past her laptop on my way to grab water. The screen was still lit up, messages open. I wasn't trying to snoop, but my eyes caught a text thread before I could look away. And what I saw made me stop cold. There were messages about the plan and making sure he doesn't find out. At first, I thought maybe she was planning a surprise for her new guy. Something sweet and romantic that had nothing to do with me. But then I saw my name. She was talking about me, about making sure I didn't find out something, about keeping the timeline straight. My stomach dropped. Every instinct I had started screaming that something was very, very wrong here. But I didn't have enough information yet, just fragments of a conversation that could mean anything. So I did what any reasonable person living with someone they no longer trusted would do. I went on Amazon and ordered a baby monitor, one of those small, discreet ones people use for nurseries. I told myself it was for safety, for documentation, just in case things got ugly. I set it up in the living room the next day, angled toward the couch where she always sat to take her calls. What I found on those recordings shattered everything I thought I knew about the past year of my life. Sarah had been cheating on me for 8 months before the breakup. 8 months. That entire time when I thought we were working through rough patches, when I was suggesting couples therapy and trying to figure out what was wrong, she'd been seeing someone else. But that wasn't even the worst part. The recordings revealed something so much darker. Sarah had orchestrated the entire breakup to frame me as the villain. She'd spent weeks setting it up, manufacturing fights, twisting my words, making me look unstable to our friends. She'd faked screenshots of text conversations that never happened, edited them to make me look controlling and paranoid. She'd manipulated timelines, told our mutual friends different versions of the same stories, all designed to paint herself as the victim and me as the problem she finally had the courage to escape from. I sat there in my room, headphones on, listening to her laugh about it with her new guy. She talked about how easy it had been to gaslight me, how I'd actually started to believe I was the one making things difficult. She joked about my confusion, my attempts to fix what was already broken by design, and the thing that really got me, the detail that made my blood run cold, was how calculated it all was. This wasn't heat of the moment cruelty. This was premeditated character assassination. I spent 3 days going through every recording, every message I could access legally, building a timeline with screenshots and timestamps. I documented everything, the real conversations versus her faked versions. The dates she claimed things happened versus when they actually did. Every lie, every manipulation, every time she told our friends I'd done or said something I absolutely hadn't. I built a case like I was preparing for trial, because in a way, I was. Here's where things escalated beyond what I ever imagined. Sarah had scheduled what she called a closure dinner with our friend group. She pitched it as this mature, healing thing where we could all get together one last time, clear the air, and move forward as adults. Our friends thought it was incredibly emotionally evolved of her. They praised her for being so strong, so willing to face the awkwardness for the sake of maintaining friendships. I almost laughed when she told me about it. She had no idea what was coming. The night of the dinner, I showed up with my laptop in my bag and a plan in my chest. We met at our favorite restaurant, the one where we'd celebrated birthdays and promotions and all those moments that felt like they mattered. 8 of us total, sitting around a table, everyone a little tense but trying to keep things light. Sarah was in her element, playing the gracious host, telling everyone how grateful she was that we could all still be friends despite the difficulties. She gave this whole speech about growth and moving forward, about how sometimes relationships end, but the people in them can still have love for each other. Our friends were eating it up, nodding along, shooting me sympathetic looks like I was the one struggling to keep up with her emotional maturity. And I just sat there, waiting, letting her finish her performance. Then I pulled out my laptop. I connected it to the restaurant's TV screen using the HDMI cable I'd brought. Sarah's face went from confused to panicked in about 2 seconds. She asked what I was doing, tried to laugh it off, but her voice had that edge to it, that fear, and that's when I played everything. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Now, back to that final dinner where everything exploded. The first thing I showed them were the faked screenshots next to the real conversations. Side by side, so obvious once you saw them together. Then the timeline she'd given everyone versus the actual timeline, with timestamps from phone records. Then came the recordings, her voice clear as day, laughing about how she'd manipulated the whole thing, talking about the affair she'd been having since 8 months before we broke up, admitting to the gaslighting with this casual cruelty that made the whole table go silent. I watched our friends' faces change in real time. The confusion, the realization, the disgust. One of them, Maya, actually gasped out loud when Sarah admitted on the recording that she'd faked being afraid of me to get sympathy. Another friend, David, just put his head in his hands. Sarah tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but I turned the volume up. I let her own words condemn her. When the final recording ended, the silence in that restaurant was deafening. Sarah was crying, mascara running down her face, trying to say it was taken out of context, that I'd edited things, that this was revenge for her moving on. But everyone at that table knew the truth now. They'd heard it directly from her. There was no spinning this. She grabbed her purse and left without another word, practically running out of the restaurant. I sat there, closed my laptop, and looked at the faces of people I'd thought had turned their backs on me. Maya apologized first, tears in her eyes, saying she'd had no idea that Sarah had been so convincing. One by one, they all apologized. They'd believed her narrative completely. Why wouldn't they? She'd been their friend too, and she'd sold the story so well. That night, every single person at the table blocked Sarah on everything. Group chats were dissolved and reformed without her. Plans were cancelled. She'd spent months carefully constructing this image of herself as the mature one, the victim, the girl who deserved better. And in one dinner, watching her own words play back, that entire image shattered into nothing. The last 6 weeks living in that apartment were different. Word had spread through our friend group, and then beyond it. Sarah barely came home anymore. Couldn't stand to be in the same space where her perfect plan had collapsed. When she did show up, it was just to grab clothes or avoid me entirely. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The day the lease finally ended, I moved out without ceremony, packed my stuff, handed my keys to the landlord, and walked away from that chapter of my life. I never saw Sarah again, never wanted to. Last I heard, she'd moved to a different city, started over somewhere nobody knew the story. And honestly, I hope she's doing better. I hope she learned something. But I also know I'll never forget what she was capable of, or how close I came to letting her rewrite history at my expense. But manipulation doesn't always come from exes. Sometimes it comes from people who fake entire tragedies just to control a narrative. So when Jenna first told us about her brother, the whole office stopped. I mean, how do you even respond to that? She came in one Monday morning, eyes red, mascara smudged, and gathered a few of us in the break room. Her younger brother had died in a car accident over the weekend. Just like that. Gone. She could barely get the words out. We were devastated for her. Within hours, the news had spread through the entire company. People were leaving cards on her desk, bringing her coffee, offering to cover her shifts. Someone even started a GoFundMe to help with funeral costs. We raised over $3,000 in 2 days. Jenna took a week off, came back still visibly shaken, and for months afterward, she'd have these moments where she'd just break down. She'd be fine 1 second, then she'd see something that reminded her of him, and she'd have to leave the room. We all gave her space, we all rallied around her. I mean, that's what you do, right? When someone's grieving, you show up. You don't ask questions, you just support them. Except I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. Little things at first. She'd be telling a story about her brother and use present tense, then catch herself and correct it to past tense. Like she'd say, "Oh, my brother loves that band," and then quickly follow it with, "I mean, he loved that band." It happened more than once. I figured it was just grief, you know. People slip up when they're traumatized. Your brain doesn't always process loss in a linear way, so I brushed it off. Then I saw her Instagram. I wasn't trying to snoop, but we followed each other, and one night I was scrolling and saw she'd been tagged in a photo at someone's birthday party. And there, in the background, clear as day, was a guy who looked exactly like the brother she'd shown us pictures of. The same face, the same build, same everything. The photo was dated 3 weeks after his supposed death. I stared at my screen for a solid 5 minutes trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was an old photo that got posted late. But no, the decorations in the background had a date on a banner. It was recent. I felt like I was losing my mind. Who questions someone's grief? What kind of monster does that? I told myself I was reading too much into it, that grief makes people do weird things with social media, that maybe she just couldn't bear to untag herself from old memories. But it kept nagging at me. I started paying closer attention, and the inconsistencies piled up. She'd mention family dinners with her brother. She'd talk about advice he'd given her recently, and every time she'd catch herself, backtrack, claim she meant before he died. It started to feel like a performance. Then came the company picnic. We do this big summer thing every year, and employees are encouraged to bring family. I wasn't planning to go, honestly, but a few of us decided to make a day of it. I was sitting at a picnic table with some coworkers when Jenna showed up, and walking right next to her, carrying a cooler, was him. The brother, the dead brother. Alive, breathing, laughing at something she'd said. I actually choked on my drink. My coworker next to me asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, unable to take my eyes off them. I watched as Jenna introduced him to a few people as my brother Kyle. Not my other brother, just Kyle. The same name she'd used when talking about the one who died. I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. One of our managers who'd donated to the GoFundMe walked up to Jenna and very gently said, "I thought you said your brother passed away." The whole group went silent. Jenna didn't even blink. She smiled, squeezed Kyle's arm and said, "Oh, this is my other brother. Different one." She said it so casually, like it was the most normal clarification in the world. But here's the thing, I'd seen her family photos. She'd shown us pictures on her phone when she first started. She used to talk about growing up with one sibling, 2 kids total. I knew for a fact she didn't have multiple brothers, and judging by the look on our manager's face, she was remembering the same thing. I didn't confront her at the picnic. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I also couldn't let it go. That night, I went full detective mode. I pulled up her Facebook, found Kyle's profile, and sent him a message. I kept it simple. I told him I worked with his sister, that I'd heard about a family tragedy, and I just wanted to extend my condolences. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just waited. He responded the next morning, and what he told me made my stomach drop. He had no idea what I was talking about. He wasn't dead. He'd never been in a car accident. He'd been living 2 states away, working as a software engineer, living his life. He asked me where I'd heard that, and I explained everything. The GoFundMe, the paid leave, the months of sympathy. He went silent for a while, and then he sent me a screenshot of a news article about a fatal car accident. It wasn't him. It was some random stranger with a similar first name from a completely different state. Jenna had taken a real tragedy, someone else's actual loss, and co-opted it for herself. Kyle was horrified. He said Jenna had always been a bit of a dramatic person, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. He asked me what I was going to do, and honestly, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to just walk away, pretend I'd never seen anything. But then I thought about the $3,000. I thought about the people who'd taken on extra work to cover her shifts. I thought about the co-workers who'd shared their own stories of loss with her, thinking they were connecting with someone who understood. She'd weaponized grief. She'd turned tragedy into currency. I screenshot everything: the Facebook conversation with Kyle, the Instagram photos, the dates, the inconsistencies. I compiled it all into a folder and sent it to HR. I didn't editorialize. I didn't add my own commentary. I just presented the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. HR launched an investigation. They pulled Jenna's leave records, cross-referenced the dates with the supposed accident, contacted Kyle directly. Within a week, Jenna was called into a meeting. She tried to stick to her story at first, but when they showed her the evidence, when they told her Kyle had confirmed he was alive, she crumbled. She admitted she'd made it up. She said she was going through a hard time, that she needed the time off, that it spiraled out of control and she didn't know how to walk it back. She was fired immediately, not just for the fraudulent leave, but for the donations. The company required her to return every cent of the GoFundMe. Some co-workers were furious, but others, they defended her. They said she must have been struggling, that we should have compassion, that mental health is complicated. And maybe they were right. Maybe she was struggling, but she also chose to exploit the grief of others. She chose to lie repeatedly for months. She looked people in the eye and accepted their money, their time, their emotional labor, knowing it was all based on a fabrication. I genuinely thought this couldn't get worse. I was wrong, because after she was fired, she posted on social media about how she'd been bullied out of her job for struggling with mental health. She framed herself as the victim. She never mentioned the lies. She never mentioned the money, just painted herself as someone who'd been persecuted for being vulnerable. And some people believed her. Some people who didn't know the full story rallied around her, sent her supportive messages, told her she deserved better. It's wild how their ego did all the heavy lifting. She built this entire house of cards, and all it took was one company picnic for the whole thing to collapse. I don't feel guilty about exposing her. I don't feel like I did anything wrong. The truth mattered more than protecting someone's false sympathy. People deserved to know who they'd been supporting, and Kyle deserved to know his sister had faked his death for paid leave and grocery money. Some of my coworkers still don't talk to me. They think I was heartless, that I should have just let it go. But I sleep fine at night, because at the end of the day, Jenna didn't just lie about a tragedy. She stole grief. She stole the compassion that people reserve for real loss. And in doing so, she made it harder for the next person who actually needs that support. That's not something you just let go. Fake stories can ruin reputations, but what happens when someone doesn't just lie about a tragedy? They steal your entire existence. It started with a phone call I didn't understand. Some collection agency asking about a credit card I'd never opened. I told them they had the wrong person, hung up, and forgot about it. Then it happened again. Different agency, different card, same confusion. I checked my credit report thinking maybe someone had made a clerical error somewhere, and what I saw made my stomach drop. My credit score had tanked. I'm talking hundreds of points gone overnight. There were accounts I'd never seen before, Maxed out cards, missed payments stretching back years. I filed police reports. I called the credit bureaus. I did everything you're supposed to do when your identity gets stolen. But nothing made sense. The addresses on the accounts were random. The purchases were all over the place, and nobody could tell me how this had happened or who was responsible. I felt like I was losing my mind. Then the parking tickets started showing up. Citations from a city 3 hours away, a place I'd never even visited. I disputed them, sent proof I wasn't there, but they kept coming. It was like fighting a ghost. I was sitting at home one night, stressed out of my mind, scrolling through social media to distract myself, when I stumbled onto my sister's Instagram, and that's when everything clicked into place. My sister, who worked part-time retail and still lived with our parents, was suddenly living like she'd won the lottery. Designer handbags in every post, vacations to places I couldn't afford, a brand new car sitting in the driveway. She was tagging luxury boutiques, posting from expensive restaurants, living a lifestyle that made 0 cents for someone making $12 an hour. I sat there staring at my phone, and this cold realization washed over me. It was her. It had been her the whole time. I started digging. I went back through her posts, looking at dates, locations, purchases. The timeline matched up perfectly with when the fraudulent accounts had been opened. The car she was driving, financed under my name. The vacation to Miami, paid for with a credit card I didn't know existed. She'd been using my social security number since she was 16. A decade, 10 years of building a fake life on my credit, while I had no idea. I confronted her at our parents' house, walked in, showed her the credit report, the photos from her Instagram, the dates that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. I asked her point blank if she'd stolen my identity, and you know what she did? She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, a genuine, dismissive laugh like I'd just accused her of something absurd. She said I'd never be able to prove it, said I was paranoid, said maybe I'd opened those accounts and forgotten about them, and now I was trying to blame her because I was jealous of her success. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I just left, because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I hired a forensic accountant and a lawyer. Cost me money I didn't have, but I didn't care. They went through everything, every account, every purchase, every transaction. They traced IP addresses, matched spending patterns, pulled records from the credit card companies, and piece by piece they built a case that was airtight. Every single fraudulent account led back to her. Her addresses, her devices, her purchases. She'd been sloppy, arrogant, confident she'd never get caught. Then came the breaking point. I pressed charges, full identity theft, fraud, the whole thing. My sister found out through a court summons, and suddenly her tune changed real fast. She called me crying, saying I was ruining her life over a misunderstanding. She tried to spin it like she'd only used my information a couple times when she was young and desperate, like it was some youthful mistake that got out of hand. She begged me to drop it, said we were family, said I was being cruel. Our parents got involved. They called me, sat me down, told me I was overreacting. My mum actually said that sending my sister to jail wouldn't fix my credit score, like that was the point. My dad said I was tearing the family apart over money. They painted me as the villain, the one causing problems, the one who couldn't let things go. They wanted me to drop the charges, handle it privately, keep it in the family. They didn't care that she'd destroyed my financial future. They just didn't want the embarrassment of having a daughter in court. I looked them both in the eye and said no. The case went to trial. My lawyer laid it all out. The forensic accountant showed the paper trail. The evidence was overwhelming. My sister tried to play the victim in court, claimed I was jealous of her lifestyle, that I'd always resented her, that this was some twisted revenge plot. Her lawyer tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that maybe someone else had stolen both our identities. It was pathetic to watch. The jury didn't buy it. She was convicted on multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. The judge wasn't sympathetic either. A decade of deliberate, calculated theft, tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges, a ruined credit score that would take years to rebuild. The sentence came down hard. Jail time, restitution, probation. Everything she'd bought with my credit got seized. The car, the designer bags, all of it. Gone. She lost everything. And honestly, She deserved it. Our parents stopped talking to me after the conviction. They said I destroyed the family, that I should have forgiven her, that blood is supposed to mean something. But here's the thing they didn't understand. She didn't steal from me once in a moment of desperation. She built an entire life on my stolen identity for 10 years. She looked me in the eye at family dinners, holidays, birthdays, knowing what she was doing and didn't feel a shred of guilt. That's not family. That's a parasite. I'm still rebuilding my credit. It's a slow process, frustrating and exhausting. I have to dispute every fraudulent account, provide documentation, wait for the bureaus to investigate. Some days it feels like I'll never fully recover from the damage she caused. But I sleep better now. I don't have that gnawing anxiety that someone out there is still using my name, still racking up debt in my name, still living a lie at my expense. She tried reaching out once after she got out, sent me a message through a mutual friend saying she was sorry, that she'd changed, that she wanted to make things right. I didn't respond. There's no coming back from what she did, no apology that erases a decade of betrayal. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. People ask me sometimes if I regret pressing charges, if I feel bad that my own sister ended up with a criminal record, and the answer is no, not even a little bit. She didn't just steal money, she stole my peace of mind, my financial security, my ability to trust. She was willing to ruin my entire future so she could pretend to be someone she wasn't. That's not a mistake. That's a choice she made every single day for 10 years. The hardest part wasn't the trial or the family fallout. It was realizing that the person I grew up with, the person I shared a childhood with, was capable of something like this, that she could look at me and see nothing but an opportunity, that my life meant so little to her that she'd burn it down without hesitation just to fund her fake lifestyle. But I'm done being her victim. I took control back. I made sure she couldn't do this to anyone else, and if that makes me the bad guy in my family's eyes, I can live with that. Because at the end of the day, I didn't destroy our family. She did. I just refused to keep pretending otherwise. Sometimes betrayal runs deeper than stolen credit. It rewrites your entire understanding of who you are. I took one of those DNA tests on a whim. You know the kind. Everyone was doing them, posting their ancestry breakdowns on social media, discovering they were 3% Scandinavian or whatever. I thought it would be fun. Maybe I'd find some distant cousins, learn something interesting about my heritage. I spit in the tube, mailed it off, and forgot about it for 6 weeks. When the results came back, I skipped straight past the ancestry percentages and went to the relatives section. That's where things got weird. Right at the top, under close family matches, there was a name I'd never seen before. Ethan, age 29. The site labeled him as a half-sibling match, 50% DNA shared. I stared at that screen until my eyes blurred, trying to make sense of it. I'm 27. I have one younger brother, Marcus, who's 23. My parents have been married for 35 years. High school sweethearts. The couple everyone points to as relationship goals. They've never even hinted at anything complicated in their past. No previous marriages, no secret history. Just a clean, simple love story that resulted in 2 kids and a house in the suburbs. I checked the results 3 more times thinking there had to be a mistake. Maybe the lab mixed up samples. Maybe this Ethan person was actually a cousin and the algorithm got confused, but the percentage was too high. Half siblings share about 50% of their DNA. Full siblings share more. This wasn't an error. This was real. I didn't know what to do with the information. I couldn't just ignore it, but I also couldn't figure out how to bring it up. Do you call a family meeting for something like this? Do you pull your parents aside individually? I sat on it for 2 days, the weight of it pressing down on me every time I looked at my phone. Finally, I decided to talk to my mum first. Just the 2 of us. I figured if anyone would help me make sense of this, it would be her. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon when I knew Dad would be at his golf game. Mum was in the kitchen making tea when I walked in, and I must have looked strange because she immediately asked if I was okay. I told her I needed to show her something. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I pulled up the DNA results on my phone. I didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward her and watched her face change. She went pale, not just a little color draining from her cheeks. I mean ghost white. Her hands started shaking. She set down her teacup and it rattled against the saucer. She stared at that screen for what felt like an hour, and then she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I didn't know his name." That's when everything started unraveling. She told me the story in fragments, stopping every few sentences to cry or collect herself. Before I was born, about 2 years into their marriage, my dad had an affair. It lasted 6 months. The woman got pregnant. My dad panicked, told my mom everything, and begged her to stay. She almost left. She had her bags packed, but he convinced her they could work through it, that he'd made a mistake, that he loved her. The other woman wanted to keep the baby. My dad didn't fight her on it, but he also didn't want the kid to be part of our lives. So he made a deal. He'd pay child support, generous child support, but she had to agree to keep the whole thing quiet. No contact with our family, no claims on our time or attention, just money, deposited monthly, and total silence. She agreed, and for 29 years, that's how it stayed. My mom knew about the affair, she knew about the baby, but she'd never met him, never asked his name, never wanted to know anything concrete, because it was easier to pretend he didn't exist. My dad had kept that part of his life completely separate, a locked box he never opened, and I'd just blown the lid off. Here's where it gets absurd. The kid, Ethan, he'd known about us his whole life. His mom had told him who his father was, shown him pictures, kept him updated on our family from a distance. He grew up knowing he had a half-sister and half-brother out there somewhere, living a life he wasn't allowed to be part of. He'd watch from the sidelines, see our family photos on social media, know exactly what he was missing, and we had no idea he existed. I reached out to him that night, sent him a message through the DNA site's messaging system. I didn't know what to say, so I just kept it simple. Told him I'd seen the match, that I'd talked to my mom, that I was trying to understand what this all meant. He responded within an hour. His message was kind, careful, like he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. He said he'd always wondered if we'd find out. He said he didn't want to disrupt anything, but he'd be open to talking if I wanted to. We met for coffee a week later. He looked like my dad, same eyes, same way of running his hand through his hair when he was nervous. It was surreal, sitting across from this stranger who was somehow my brother. He told me about his life. His mum had raised him alone with the child support money. He'd gone to college, become a teacher, build a good life for himself. But there was this hole in it, this absence where a father should have been. He'd sent my dad letters over the years, birthday cards, emails. Every single one went unanswered. The breaking point came when I confronted my dad. I didn't plan some big dramatic scene. I just showed up at the house one evening and asked him point blank about Ethan. He tried to deny it at first, said the DNA test must be wrong, that there were explanations. But when I told him I'd met Ethan, when I described his face and his voice and the way he talked about feeling abandoned, my dad just crumbled. He admitted everything, the affair, the money, the deliberate choice to ignore his own son for nearly 3 decades. I asked him why. Why pay for a kid but never acknowledge him? Why let him send letters that went straight into the trash? And my dad said something I'll never forget. He said he'd already built one family and he didn't have room for another. Like love is a finite resource. Like you can only care about a certain number of people before you hit capacity. My mum filed for divorce 2 months later. She said she'd forgiven the affair, worked through the betrayal, accepted that people make mistakes. But watching my dad refuse to acknowledge his own son, watching him treat Ethan like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved, that was something she couldn't get past. She'd spent nearly 30 years trying to save a marriage to a man who apparently didn't understand what family meant. Marcus, my younger brother, stopped speaking to Dad entirely. He took it harder than I did in some ways. He'd idolized our father growing up, thought he could do no wrong. Finding out he'd had a whole secret child he'd abandoned shattered that image completely. Marcus reached out to Ethan too. The 3 of us have gotten close over the past year. We meet for dinner once a month. We text. We're building something that feels like real sibling bonds, even though we're doing it 3 decades late. But the family I grew up with, that's gone. Shattered. My parents' house sold 6 months ago. My dad lives in an apartment across town now, and none of us visit. He tried to explain himself a few times, sent long emails about how complicated the situation was, how he'd been trying to protect everyone. But you can't protect people with lies. You can't build anything real on a foundation of silence and pretending. Ethan told me once that he used to fantasize about being part of our family. He'd imagine showing up at Thanksgiving, or being included in the Christmas card photo, or just having a dad who acknowledged him in public. And now that we're actually in each other's lives, the family he wanted to join doesn't exist anymore. The version of us that looked perfect in those photos was always fiction, just a carefully maintained performance with a secret hidden underneath. A single DNA test destroyed 30 years of pretending. And honestly, I think it needed to, because what we had before wasn't real family. It was just people sharing a house while keeping massive secrets from each other. Real family doesn't require lies. It doesn't ask you to pretend entire human beings don't exist. And if acknowledging the truth breaks everything apart, then maybe what you had wasn't as solid as you thought in the first place. DNA can uncover siblings you never knew existed, but some family secrets are deliberately hidden by the people who raised you. I was 3 months old when my mother supposedly died giving birth to me. That's what I was told my entire life. My Aunt Eleanor stepped in, raised me like I was her own daughter, and I never questioned it. Why would I? She was everything a parent should be. She showed up to every school play, helped with homework, taught me to drive, held me when I cried over breakups. I loved her fiercely. She was my mom in every way that mattered. When my grandmother passed away, Eleanor asked me to help clean out her attic. We spent days going through boxes of old photographs, books, clothes that smelled like mothballs, and memories. I was in the corner sorting through a stack of papers when I found a shoebox tucked behind some old Christmas decorations. It was taped shut, covered in dust, like someone had hidden it and forgotten it existed. I opened it without thinking much about it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. All from someone named Catherine, my mother's name. My hands started shaking before my brain even caught up. I pulled out the first letter, postmarked from 18 years ago, and started reading. It was written to a 5-year-old me. She told me about her day, asked about kindergarten, said she missed me more than words could describe. She promised she was getting better, that she'd see me soon. The next letter was from 6 months later, then another, then another. Years of letters tracking my entire childhood from a distance, written by a woman who was supposed to be dead. I sat there on the attic floor, surrounded by evidence that my entire life had been a lie, and I couldn't breathe. Eleanor called up asking if I was okay, and I couldn't even answer. I just stared at the letters, at my mother's handwriting, at the dates that proved she'd been alive this whole time. Alive and writing to me. Alive and being kept from me. When I finally confronted Eleanor, she went pale. I held up the letters and asked her to explain, and I watched her face crumble in real time. She tried to hug me, tried to calm me down, but I stepped back. I needed answers, not comfort. So she told me everything. My mother had been a drug addict. That part was true. She'd gotten pregnant young, spiraled hard, and by the time I was born, she was in no state to take care of a baby. Eleanor had stepped in, took custody, and eventually adopted me legally to give me stability. She said she did it to protect me, to give me a life my mother couldn't provide, and for years that was the whole story. My mother was too lost in her addiction to be a parent, so Eleanor became one instead. But that wasn't even the worst part. My mother had gotten clean. She'd gone to rehab, done the work, stayed sober, and fought to get me back. She'd hired lawyers, attended supervised visits, jumped through every hoop the court system put in front of her. And Eleanor had blocked her at every single turn. She'd painted my mother as unstable, unreliable, a danger to my well-being. She'd used her position as my legal guardian to make sure my mother's visitation requests were denied. And when my mother kept trying, kept writing letters, kept showing up, Eleanor hid it all from me. Every letter, every attempt at contact, every proof that my mother hadn't abandoned me. Eleanor stood in that attic crying, telling me she'd done it out of love. She said she was terrified of losing me, that she'd raised me and couldn't bear the thought of some stranger coming in and taking me away. She said my mother had already proven she couldn't be trusted, and Eleanor wasn't going to risk my safety on the chance that sobriety would stick. She genuinely believed she'd done the right thing. She looked at me like I was supposed to understand, to forgive, to see that her intentions were pure. I didn't. I left that attic with the box of letters and didn't speak to her for 3 days. I read every single one. I watched my mother's desperation evolve into heartbreak as years passed and I never responded. I read about her marriage to a man who supported her sobriety. I read about the life she'd built, the person she'd become, the daughter she'd never stopped loving, and I realized Eleanor hadn't protected me. She'd stolen from both of us. Finding my mother was easier than I expected. She still lived in the same town, same address from the return labels on the letters. I showed up at her door unannounced because I didn't trust myself to call first. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she knew immediately who I was. I looked just like her. Same eyes, same nose, same way of standing with my weight on one hip. She put her hand over her mouth and just stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. We talked for 6 hours that first day. She told me everything Eleanor had left out, the custody battle that lasted years, the letters she'd sent that never got responses, the birthdays she'd spent wondering if I even knew she existed. She showed me a room in a house that she'd kept for me just in case, a bed I'd never slept in, books she'd bought hoping I'd visit, photographs of a daughter she'd only seen from a distance. She was sober, 15 years clean, remarried to someone kind who knew everything about her past and loved her anyway. She had a life, a good one, and a hole in it shaped exactly like me. And Eleanor had known. Eleanor had watched my mother transform, stay clean, build stability, and still decided I was better off thinking she was dead. And here's where it gets absurd. When I told Eleanor I'd found my mother, that we were rebuilding a relationship, she acted like I was betraying her. She cried, said she'd sacrificed everything to raise me, that my mother didn't deserve a second chance after abandoning me. I had to remind her that my mother hadn't abandoned me. Eleanor had stolen me. There's a difference. My mother and I are rebuilding, but it's complicated. We're essentially strangers trying to build a relationship that should have existed for 23 years. We don't have shared memories. We don't have inside jokes or family traditions. We have letters she wrote that I never received, and a lifetime of missed moments that we can't get back. She missed my first day of school, my graduation, my first heartbreak. I missed having a mother who fought for me, who wanted me, who never stopped trying. Eleanor still calls sometimes, leaves voicemails saying she misses me, that she's sorry, that she hopes I'll forgive her someday. But how do you forgive someone for stealing 20 years, for looking you in the eye every day and maintaining a lie that destroyed someone else's life? She didn't protect me. She protected her own fear of loss, and she decided that was more important than my right to know my own mother. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't even the lie itself. It's how easy it was for her to maintain it. How she celebrated my birthdays, knowing my real mother was out there grieving. How she helped me with homework while letters sat hidden in an attic. How she played the role of devoted parent while actively sabotaging the woman who gave birth to me. That takes a special kind of commitment to delusion. My mother and I went to therapy together. We're working through it, trying to build something real out of the wreckage Eleanor left behind. Some days are good. We'll have coffee and talk about our lives, and it almost feels natural. Other days, the weight of everything we lost sits between us like a third person at the table. She'll mention something about my childhood and realize she wasn't there for it. I'll have a memory with Eleanor and feel guilty for enjoying it. The years we lost haunt us both. There's no getting them back, no do-over for the mother-daughter relationship we should have had. We can build something new, something real, but it'll always exist in the shadow of what Eleanor took from us. And that's the part I can't forgive. Not the initial adoption, not even the decision to keep my mother away when I was young and she was newly sober. It's the years after. The decade plus of watching my mother stay clean, build a life, prove herself over and over, and still choosing to keep us apart. I cut Eleanor off completely, changed my number, blocked her on everything, made it clear we're done. Some family members think I'm being too harsh, that she raised me and deserves some grace. But grace isn't the same as allowing someone to remain in your life after they've proven they'll lie to you for decades to serve their own needs. She had countless opportunities to tell me the truth. She chose the lie every single time. My relationship with my mother will never be what it could have been. We'll never have the easy closeness of people who grew up together. But we have now. We have the chance to know each other as adults, to build something honest even if it's starting 20 years too late. And that's more than Eleanor ever wanted us to have. Families can hide painful truths to protect you, but romantic partners sometimes fake entire futures while planning betrayals. The proposal happened on a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Ryan had planned everything perfectly. String lights, champagne, both our families hiding at nearby tables ready to surprise us. When he got down on one knee, I cried. I said yes. Everyone cheered. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. And for about 48 hours it was. But even in that moment, something felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. Ryan had been distant for weeks leading up to the proposal. Late nights at work, phone calls he'd taken in another room, a new password on his phone that he claimed was for security after reading some article about data breaches. I'd pushed the feelings down, told myself I was being paranoid, that he was probably just stressed about planning the proposal. Turns out my gut knew something my brain didn't want to accept. 2 days after I said yes, I was looking for a photo on our shared cloud account. We'd been using it for years to back up pictures, share files, the usual couple stuff. I was scrolling through recent uploads when I saw a folder I didn't recognize. It was dated from 3 weeks ago. I clicked it without thinking, expecting maybe some surprise honeymoon planning or wedding ideas he'd been researching. What I found instead made me physically ill. Videos, multiple videos, Ryan and another woman, in our bed, in our apartment. The bed I slept in every night, the sheets I'd washed a dozen times not knowing what had happened in them. The timestamps went back months. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was deliberate, repeated, calculated betrayal. I sat there on our couch, staring at my phone, feeling like the entire floor had dropped out from under me. He'd proposed to me while actively cheating. He'd looked me in the eye, told me he wanted to spend his life with me, slipped a ring on my finger, all while having this whole other relationship happening behind my back. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. I could have confronted him right then. Screamed, thrown things, demanded answers, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was rage, so pure it bypassed emotion and went straight to calculation. I didn't want a private fight that he could spin, minimize, explain away. I wanted everyone who'd celebrated our engagement to know exactly who they'd been cheering for. So I started planning. I told Ryan I wanted to organize a celebration dinner with both families to properly toast our engagement. He loved the idea, said it was sweet that his parents would be thrilled. I picked the same restaurant where he'd proposed, booked a private room with a projector because I said I wanted to show a slideshow of our relationship. He thought it was romantic. He had no idea what was coming. The dinner was set for the following Saturday. I spent that week acting normal, playing the happy fiancé, all while preparing exactly what I was going to show. I edited the videos down, removed anything graphic, but kept enough that the situation was crystal clear. I made sure the timestamps were visible. I even included screenshots of their text messages that I'd found in the cloud, the ones where they talked about me, laughed about how clueless I was, made plans for their next meetup. Here's where it gets absurd. I sent an invitation to his coworker, the woman from the videos. I found her through his work directory, sent her a message saying Ryan and I were having an engagement celebration, and he'd mentioned wanting her there as a valued colleague. She accepted. She actually thanked me for including her and said she was excited to celebrate with us. She had no idea he'd proposed to me. She thought they were in an actual relationship. The night of the dinner, everyone showed up. Both sets of parents, siblings, a few close friends, and her. She walked in looking confused when she saw the setup, but I welcomed her warmly, introduced her to people as Ryan's coworker. Ryan looked uncomfortable when he saw her, but couldn't exactly make a scene. I seated her right at the table with everyone else. We ate, we talked, people shared stories about Ryan and me, about how they knew we were meant to be together, about how happy they were for us. His mom kept squeezing my hand, telling me how lucky she was to be gaining a daughter. I smiled through all of it, waiting. Then came the toasts. Ryan's dad went first, talking about love and commitment. My mom went next, getting emotional about her baby getting married. Then I stood up. I said I'd put together a little presentation about our relationship, some moments I wanted to share. Ryan looked pleased, probably thinking it was going to be cute photos and sappy music. I turned on the projector. The first clip started playing. It took people a second to understand what they were seeing. Then Ryan's mother made this sound, like all the air had left her body at once. His father stood up so fast his chair fell backward. My dad just stared at the screen. his face going red, and Ryan sat there frozen, watching his whole life implode in real time. The other woman gasped. She looked at me, then at Ryan, then back at the screen. You could see her brain trying to process what was happening, trying to reconcile the relationship she thought she had with the reality playing out in front of 30 people. When the video ended, I played the text messages, the ones where Ryan called me clingy, where he said the proposal was just to keep me happy while he figured things out, where he and this woman made fun of the ring I was wearing, called it a placeholder. The silence in that room was deafening. Then Ryan's mother screamed at him. Not words exactly, just this guttural sound of rage and disappointment. His father walked out without saying anything, and you could hear him shouting in the parking lot. My mum was crying. My dad looked like he wanted to hit something. The other woman stood up, walked over to Ryan, and slapped him across the face. Hard. She called him a liar, said she'd had no idea, that he'd told her I was just a roommate he was planning to move away from. She left in tears. Multiple people left in tears, actually. I took off the ring, set it on the table in front of Ryan, and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just left. Got in my car and drove home to my parents' house where I'd secretly moved most of my important stuff the day before. Both families cut him off. His parents were mortified. They apologized to me repeatedly, said they'd raised him better than that they couldn't believe what he'd done. They paid for me to break the lease on our apartment. My family wanted me to press charges for something, anything. But there was nothing illegal about what he'd done, just breathtakingly cruel. Ryan tried apologizing, sent messages through friends, showed up at my work, even sent letters to my parents' house. He said he'd made a mistake, that he loved me, that he wanted to fix things. He claimed the other woman had pursued him, that he'd gotten confused, that the proposal was real and he'd been planning to end things with her. Every excuse in the book, each one more pathetic than the last. I blocked him everywhere, changed my number, made it clear through mutual friends that if he contacted me again, I'd file for a restraining order. Eventually, he stopped trying. Last I heard, he'd moved to a different city, probably to escape the reputation he'd earned. Because everyone knew. The story spread fast. His co-workers knew. His friends knew. You can't humiliate someone that publicly and expect it to stay contained. People asked me if I regretted it, if I thought the public call-out was too harsh. And here's the thing, he didn't just cheat. He proposed while cheating. He invited our families to celebrate a commitment he had no intention of honoring. He was going to marry me while sleeping with someone else, probably would have kept it going through the engagement, maybe even into the marriage. That level of deception doesn't deserve a quiet breakup and a mature conversation. It deserves exactly what it got. The revenge was sweet, not because I enjoyed hurting him, but because I took back control of a narrative he'd written without my consent. He'd made me the fool without my knowledge. I made sure everyone knew I wasn't the fool. He was. Public humiliation can be satisfying, but some betrayals are quieter, gaslighting you until you question your own sanity. My entire friend group turned on me in the span of a week. One day we were making plans for someone's birthday. The next I was being called dramatic, unstable, a liar. Group chats went silent when I posted. Invitations stopped coming. People I'd known for years started treating me like I was radioactive, and I had no idea why. Then Chloe, my best friend since high school, sent me a long message. She said she couldn't be friends with me anymore, that I'd been harassing her for months, sending threatening texts, stalking her boyfriend Jake. She said she tried to handle it privately, but I'd gotten worse and now she had to protect herself. She was sorry, but I needed help, and she couldn't be the one to give it to me. I read that message 5 times trying to make sense of it. Harassing her, threatening her, stalking Jake. None of that had happened. I'd barely even talked to Jake beyond polite conversation at group hangouts. I'd never sent Chloe anything remotely threatening. We'd had normal best friend conversations about work, relationships, stupid memes. Where was this coming from? I tried calling her. She didn't answer. I reached out to other people in the group asking what was going on. Most ignored me. One person, Maya, finally responded. She sent me screenshots, messages that supposedly came from me, saying horrible things to Chloe. Threats about ruining her life, obsessive messages about Jake, accusations that Chloe was trying to steal my friends. The texts were unhinged, paranoid, cruel, and they looked real. My name, my profile picture, timestamps, everything. Except I'd never sent them. I tried explaining this to Maya, but she just said she was sorry, that the evidence was clear, and maybe I should talk to a therapist about why I was doing this, like I was having some kind of mental breakdown and didn't remember my own actions. I felt like I was losing my mind. Everyone believed I'd done these things. Everyone had seen proof, but I knew I hadn't. The cognitive dissonance was destroying me. I stopped sleeping. I went over every conversation I'd had with Chloe looking for something I might have said that could be twisted into what she was claiming. Nothing. We'd been fine. We'd been best friends. Then I remembered something. About 6 months earlier, I'd set up automatic cloud backups for all my messages. I'd done it after losing a phone and wanting to make sure I didn't lose important conversations again. Every text, every chat app message, everything backed up with timestamps and metadata. I pulled the logs, went through every single conversation I'd had with Chloe for the past year. And there it was. The real conversations, normal stuff, friendly banter. Nothing remotely close to what she was showing people. I compared the screenshots Maya had sent me to my actual message logs. The content was completely different. Chloe had been editing our conversations, fabricating threats that had never existed, and spreading them as proof of my instability. But that wasn't even the worst part. I dug deeper into the metadata, cross-referenced timestamps, and found something else. On the days when I was supposedly sending obsessive messages to Jake, my phone location data showed I was at work, at home, places with no connection to where he was, and then I found it. Evidence of a phone spoofing app on Chloe's cloud account that we'd briefly shared for a group project. She'd been texting Jake from my number, creating a fake paper trail of me stalking him when I'd never contacted him at all. She'd built an entire false narrative, edited screenshots, spoofed messages, probably even coached Jake on what to say if anyone asked him about it. And she'd done it so carefully that everyone believed her, without question. I was the crazy one. She was the victim, and I had almost no way to defend myself. Except now I did. I had the real message logs. I had the metadata showing her edits. I had evidence of the spoofing app. I had everything I needed to prove she'd fabricated the whole thing, and I wasn't about to handle this privately. I created a public post, posted the real message logs side by side with her fake screenshots, highlighted where she'd edited them, showed the metadata timestamps, explained how spoofing apps work, and provided evidence she'd used one. I laid it all out, methodical and thorough, so there was no room for doubt. Then I tagged everyone who'd called me crazy, everyone who'd believed her, everyone who'd cut me off without even asking for my side of the story. The response was immediate. Chloe tried to delete her fake screenshots, but people had already saved them. She claimed my evidence was fabricated, that I was the one manipulating data, but the metadata didn't lie. She said I was harassing her by posting publicly, which was rich coming from someone who'd spent months destroying my reputation with lies. And here's where it gets absurd. People started coming forward with their own stories. Turns out I wasn't the first person Chloe had done this to. She'd pulled similar stunts with an ex-friend in college, spread rumors about a co-worker at her old job, always playing the victim while quietly destroying people behind the scenes. She had a pattern. I'd just been stupid enough not to see it until I was the target. The friend group imploded. Maya apologized, said she should have questioned things more, should have asked for my side before believing Chloe's screenshots. Others echoed the same sentiment. They felt terrible, wanted to make it right, wanted me back in the group. They'd organize a dinner, talk things through, rebuild what had been broken. I said no, not out of spite, not because I wanted to punish them, but because the trust was gone. These were people who'd known me for years, people I'd been there for through breakups, job losses, family drama. And the moment someone presented evidence against me, they didn't question it, didn't reach out to ask what was happening, just accepted that I'd suddenly become an unstable stalker and cut me off. Trust, once broken like that, doesn't just snap back into place because someone apologizes. They'd shown me exactly how much my word was worth to them when it was stacked against fabricated screenshots, which was nothing. Chloe tried to salvage her reputation, claimed there had been a misunderstanding, that maybe her phone had been hacked and someone else had created the fake messages. Nobody bought it. She'd been too specific, too detailed, too committed to the lie for it to be anything other than deliberate. She lost the friend group entirely. Last I heard, she'd moved to a different city and scrubbed her social media clean. Jake, interestingly, vanished from her life shortly after. Turns out their relationship had been rocky for months, and she'd manufactured the stalking story to create drama, make him feel protective, give them a common enemy to unite against. Classic manipulation tactic. When the truth came out, he realized what kind of person he was actually dating and left. I built a new friend group, people who didn't know Chloe, who had no connection to that mess. It took time, felt awkward starting over in my mid-20s when everyone already had established social circles. But these friendships were built on actual trust, not just shared history and convenience. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't had those backups, if I'd just accepted everyone's version of reality and started questioning my own sanity. How many people has Chloe done this to who didn't have evidence to fight back? How many reputations has she destroyed because someone didn't think to keep receipts? The scariest part wasn't the lies themselves. It was how easily everyone believed them. How quickly years of friendship evaporated in the face of edited screenshots and a convincing performance. People want to believe victims. That's generally a good thing. But it also means that anyone willing to lie convincingly enough can weaponize that instinct and destroy someone's entire social life. I don't regret exposing her publicly. Some people said I should have handled it privately, that airing everything out was petty, but she'd publicly destroyed my reputation. A private conversation wouldn't have undone the damage. Everyone who'd called me crazy needed to see exactly how wrong they'd been. Not for revenge, for the record. The friend group still reaches out occasionally. Birthday messages, holiday texts, attempts to reconnect. I keep things polite but distant. They made their choice when it mattered. The apologies don't erase that. And honestly, I'm better off without people who need ironclad evidence before they'll take my word over a liar's. When someone builds their lies carefully, they rarely expect you to have a backup plan or a backup relationship. I came home early from a work trip. One of those situations where meetings got cancelled and I managed to catch an earlier flight, texting Mark that I'd be back by dinner instead of the next morning. He didn't respond, which wasn't unusual. He was terrible with his phone. I figured I'd surprise him, maybe order takeout, have a quiet night in after 3 days of hotel rooms and conference calls. His car was in the driveway when I pulled up. So was another car I didn't recognize. A silver sedan, newish, parked like someone who planned to stay a while. I sat in my car for a second, trying to think of reasonable explanations. Maybe a coworker stopped by. Maybe he was helping a friend with something. Maybe I was being paranoid and there was a perfectly innocent reason for a strange car to be at our house in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon. I walked in quietly. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual, but the house had this weird stillness to it. No TV on, no music, just silence. Then I heard laughter from upstairs. Mark's laugh and someone else's, light and feminine. My stomach dropped. I knew before I even started climbing the stairs what I was going to find, but some part of my brain was still hoping I was wrong. I crept up, each step feeling like it took an hour. The bedroom door was slightly open. I could hear them talking now, casual conversation, comfortable in a way that made my skin crawl. I pushed the door open the rest of the way. Mark was in bed with a woman I'd never seen before, not getting dressed, not scrambling to cover up, just in bed, together, in the bed we shared. They both froze when they saw me. The woman grabbed for the sheets. Mark's face went white. Nobody said anything for what felt like an eternity. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took a photo. The click of the shutter was the only sound in the room. Then I looked at Mark and said, "You have 1 hour to be gone." I walked back downstairs, called my sister and called a locksmith. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial, but I kept my voice steady. Told my sister what happened, asked her to come over with whoever she could grab from the family. Told the locksmith I needed locks changed immediately and I'd pay whatever emergency fee he wanted. Both said they'd be there in 20 minutes. Mark came downstairs about 5 minutes later. The woman stayed upstairs, probably getting dressed, probably mortified. He tried to talk to me, started with apologies, moved to explanations. And that's when things got completely unhinged. He said she was his backup, like a spare tire. He said he wasn't sure about marriage, Wasn't sure about us, so he'd been keeping her around in case things didn't work out. He'd been seeing her for 8 months since right around the time we got engaged. He acted like this was reasonable, like I should understand the logic of maintaining a backup relationship while planning a wedding. I laughed, I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it broke something in me, and I just laughed. Here was a man I'd been planning to marry, standing in our living room, explaining his infidelity like it was a sound financial strategy, diversifying his emotional portfolio. My family started arriving. My sister first, then my brother, then my dad. They walked in to find Mark still trying to justify himself, still acting like he was the reasonable one in this situation. My brother told him to shut up and start packing. My dad just stared at him with this look of complete disgust. The locksmith showed up right on schedule. Mark tried to argue that he lived there too, that I couldn't just kick him out, that this was his house. I reminded him the lease was in my name. He'd moved in with me 2 years ago and never gotten added to the paperwork. Legally, he was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. The locksmith changed the locks while Mark packed a bag, and the whole thing had this surreal quality, like I was watching it happen to someone else. The woman finally came downstairs. She looked mortified, wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. She mumbled an apology and left quickly, practically running to her car. Mark followed about 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and his laptop. He tried one more time to talk to me, said we should discuss this like adults, that I was being irrational. My dad stepped between us and told him to leave. Mark left. I posted the photo on social media that night. Didn't tag him, didn't write a novel explaining what happened. Just the photo and a caption. Always have a backup plan. Let people draw their own conclusions. And they did. Comments poured in. People who knew us, people who'd been invited to the wedding, all of them putting the pieces together in real time. But that wasn't even the worst part. Turns out the woman was his boss's daughter. She'd just moved back to town, started working at a different branch of the same company. And Mark had apparently decided she was perfect backup material. When his boss saw the post, saw his daughter in bed with an engaged employee, he lost it. Mark was fired within 48 hours. Violation of company policy, inappropriate workplace relationship, conduct unbecoming, the whole 9 yards. Mark blamed me for ruining his career, sent angry messages saying I'd gone too far, that posting the photo was vindictive and cruel, that I'd destroyed his life over a mistake. A mistake. 8 months of deliberately maintaining a second relationship while planning to marry me was apparently just a little oopsie. I blocked him everywhere, changed my number, returned every wedding gift that had already arrived with a note explaining the wedding was cancelled due to the groom's inability to count to 1. My family helped me box up everything Mark had left behind and dropped it at his parents' house. I didn't want a single reminder of him in my space. The wedding venue let me out of the contract when I showed them the circumstances. The photographer did too. Turns out most vendors have clauses for infidelity situations because it happens more often than you'd think. I lost the deposits on a few things, but considering what I could have lost, it was a bargain. People asked if I regretted posting the photo, if I thought it was too harsh, too public, too permanent. And honestly, not even a little bit. He'd made a calculated decision to hedge his bets on our relationship. I made a calculated decision to let everyone know exactly what kind of person he was. Seems fair. The part that still gets me is the backup thing. Not just that he cheated, but that he'd built this entire framework around it. He'd convinced himself he was being smart, strategic, keeping his options open. Like love is something you can diversify. Like commitment is just one part of a balanced portfolio of relationships. I dodged a nuclear bullet. If I hadn't come home early, if I hadn't walked in, how long would it have gone on? Would he have married me while keeping her on standby? Would I have found out on my honeymoon or 5 years into a marriage? The thought makes me sick. I'm not dating right now, taking time to remember what I actually want, what I deserve, what real commitment looks like. And it doesn't look like a man who keeps backup plans in case his primary relationship doesn't work out. It looks like someone who shows up, who chooses you, who doesn't need an insurance policy against the possibility that loving you might be a mistake. Mark tried reaching out a few months later through a mutual friend, said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted to talk, that he missed me. I told the friend to tell him I have a backup ex-fiancé in case talking to him doesn't work out. Haven't heard from him since. Backup plans aren't always romantic. Sometimes they're messages that arrive from strangers who know more than they should. The text came through on a Tuesday afternoon while I was making dinner. Unknown number, no caller ID, just one line. Your husband is not who you think he is. Check the garage. I stared at it for a solid minute, trying to figure out if it was spam, a wrong number, or some weird prank. I almost deleted it, almost convinced myself it was nothing. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was in the garage? We barely used the space except for storage, random boxes of holiday decorations, and old furniture we kept meaning to donate. Alex never went out there. At least I thought he didn't. The message sat in my phone like a splinter, small but impossible to ignore. I waited until Alex left for his evening run. He had a routine, same time every night, gone for exactly 45 minutes. I went to the garage, turned on the light, and just stood there looking at the familiar mess. Everything seemed normal. Boxes stacked against the wall, his old golf clubs, the lawnmower we never used because we paid someone to cut the grass. I almost gave up and went back inside, wrote the whole thing off as somebody messing with random phone numbers. But then I saw it. Behind a stack of boxes in the far corner, tucked into a spot you wouldn't notice unless you were specifically looking, there was a small black backpack. It didn't belong to either of us. I pulled it out, unzipped it, and found a phone inside. A burner phone, the cheap kind you buy at convenience stores with prepaid minutes. I turned it on. No password. And that's when my entire marriage imploded in the space of about 3 minutes. The messages were all there. Conversations with multiple women, but one name that appeared more than the others. Someone named Jess. The text went back 2 years. Pet names, I love yous, plans for the future. Photos I'd never seen. Alex with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. Alex at restaurants I'd never been to. Alex living a completely separate life that had nothing to do with me. Then I found the Venmo history. Payments sent to Jess, labeled things like rent help and groceries, and for Emma. Hundreds of dollars at a time, sometimes weekly. I checked the dates against our bank statements in my head. All those weekend work trips he'd been taking for the past 2 years, the ones where he said he had to visit clients or attend conferences. The timing matched perfectly. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I sat down on the concrete floor of the garage, surrounded by boxes of Christmas ornaments and evidence that my husband had been living a double life. I felt like I was going to throw up, or scream, or both. Alex came back from his run and found me sitting at the kitchen table with the burner phone in front of me. He saw it and went pale, didn't even try to pretend he didn't know what it was, just stood there in his running gear, sweating, staring at the phone like it was a bomb about to go off. I asked him one question, who is Jess? And here's where it gets absurd. He tried to lie, even with the evidence literally sitting between us, even knowing I'd seen everything. He still tried to spin some story about it being complicated, about how I wouldn't understand. I cut him off, told him I'd read the messages, seen the photos, tracked the payments. I knew about the girlfriend. I knew about the kid she had that he was helping support. I knew about the apartment he'd been paying rent on in a city 2 hours away. I knew everything. He crumbled, just completely fell apart, admitted the whole thing. He'd met Jess at a work conference 3 years ago. They'd started talking, one thing led to another, and suddenly he was living 2 lives. She had a daughter from a previous relationship, and Alex had stepped into this weird pseudo-father role. The weekend work trips were visits to them. The late nights at the office were phone calls he couldn't take at home. The new password on his phone, the separate credit card I'd noticed but he'd explained away as being for work expenses, all of it was infrastructure for a relationship I had no idea existed. I asked him why. Why marry me if he wanted to be with someone else? Why keep up this charade for years? And his answer was almost worse than the cheating itself. He said he loved us both, said he couldn't choose, said he'd been trying to figure out how to handle it without hurting anyone. Like there was some magical solution where he could keep both relationships going indefinitely and nobody would get hurt. The level of delusion was almost impressive. I filed for divorce the next day, called a lawyer first thing in the morning, started the process before I could second-guess myself or let Alex talk me into some therapy and reconciliation situation. He tried, begged me to wait, to think about it, said he'd end things with Jess immediately, that he'd made a horrible mistake, but you don't accidentally maintain a secret relationship for 3 years. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you make every single day. That's when everything unraveled even further. A week into the divorce process, I got another text from the same unknown number. This time it said, "I'm sorry I had to tell you, but you deserve to know." I responded asking who it was. The answer came back immediately. Jess. She'd found out about me. Went through Alex's things while he was in the shower and discovered he had a whole other life. Photos of our wedding, joint bank statements, evidence that he was married to someone who wasn't her. She'd been just as blindsided as I was. The anonymous message wasn't from some concerned friend or random stranger. It was from the other woman who'd realized she was the other woman and decided we both deserve better than Alex's lies. It's wild how betrayal works sometimes. The person I should have hated, the woman my husband had been cheating with, ended up being the one who gave me the truth. She could have stayed quiet, could have confronted Alex privately, and tried to keep him for herself. Instead, she burned it all down and made sure I knew what was happening. I never met her, never had a conversation beyond those 2 text messages, but in a weird way, I'm grateful. She could have let me keep living in ignorance, keep thinking my marriage was solid while Alex balanced 2 families like it was some kind of game. Instead, she handed me proof and walked away. Alex tried to salvage things with both of us, lost both of us instead. Jess blocked him completely. I pushed the divorce through as fast as legally possible. Last I heard, he'd moved to a different state, probably to escape the wreckage of the life he'd built on lies. Good riddance. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't even the cheating itself. It's the calculation behind it. The deliberate construction of 2 separate realities. The ability to look me in the eye every single day and maintain a performance that convincing. How do you kiss your wife goodbye in the morning, spend the weekend with your girlfriend, and come home like nothing happened? What kind of person can compartmentalize that completely? People ask if I ever suspected, and honestly, no. That's the part that makes me feel stupid. There were no obvious red flags, no suspicious behavior that I ignored. He was good at it, scary good. He made me feel loved and secure while running a completely separate relationship on the side. That's a special kind of sociopathic. The divorce finalized 6 months ago. I kept the house, split everything else down the middle, and walked away from a 7-year marriage with nothing but anger and a hard-earned lesson about trusting my gut. Because that text message, the one I almost deleted, that was my gut screaming at me through a stranger's phone number. I still don't know how Jess got my number. Never asked. It doesn't really matter. What matters is she gave me the truth when my own husband had spent years burying it. Anonymous tips can destroy marriages, but sometimes the marriage was already destroyed. You just didn't know it yet. Anonymous tips can unravel marriages, but workplace betrayals are often more calculated and cruel. My boss called me into his office one Tuesday morning and told me he had good news. We were hiring someone new to help with my workload. I'd been juggling way too much, he said, working late nights and weekends, and he didn't want me to burn out. He wanted me to mentor this new hire, get her up to speed on everything I did. Her name was Kelly, and she'd be starting the following Monday. I was actually relieved. I'd been drowning in work for months. The idea of having someone to share the load sounded incredible. When Kelly started, she seemed perfect for the role. Eager, friendly, asked great questions. She took notes on everything I showed her, stayed late to learn new systems, constantly thanked me for being so patient with her training. I spent months teaching her everything I knew, how our project management system worked, which clients needed extra handholding, the shortcuts I'd developed over years to streamline processes. I showed her my spreadsheets, my client contact lists, my proprietary methods for tracking deliverables. I basically gave her my entire playbook because I thought we were going to be working together, sharing responsibilities, building something as a team. She was so appreciative, always bringing me coffee, telling me how much she was learning, saying she hoped to be half as good at the job as I was someday. I genuinely liked her, thought we were becoming friends. I even invited her to a few after-work happy hours with other colleagues. Then one day, about 4 months into her training, I was working late when I needed to reference an old email thread. I searched my inbox and accidentally pulled up something that had been CC'd to me by mistake. The subject line read, "Transition Plan." I opened it thinking it was about a client project transition. It wasn't. It was an email chain between my boss, HR, and Kelly. They were discussing my termination. the timeline for letting me go, how to handle the client handoff, and the budget savings they'd get from replacing me with Kelly at half my salary. I scrolled through the thread, my hands shaking, reading messages that went back 6 months. They'd hired Kelly specifically to replace me. Every single thing I'd taught her was so she could do my job for less money. I'd been training my own replacement and didn't even know it. I sat there in my empty office, staring at that email chain, feeling physically sick. All those late nights helping Kelly learn systems, all the times I'd patiently explained client quirks and relationship dynamics, the proprietary processes I'd developed over years that I'd handed over freely because I thought we were on the same team. I'd gift wrapped my entire job and given it to someone who was being paid to push me out. The betrayal from my boss was one thing, but Kelly had known the whole time. Every thank you, every compliment, every coffee she brought me was a performance. She'd looked me in the eye for 4 months knowing I was training myself out of a job, and she'd never said a word. I could have confronted them right then, stormed into my boss's office, demanded an explanation, made a scene, but something stopped me. They clearly thought they had this all figured out. They thought they could ease me out, slide Kelly into my role, and everything would continue smoothly. They thought my job was just a collection of tasks that anyone could do with the right training. They were wrong, and I was going to prove it. I didn't change my behavior at all, kept training Kelly, kept being friendly, kept answering her questions, but I started documenting everything differently. I made copies of all my client relationship notes, my project histories, my process documents. I backed up everything to personal drives they couldn't access, and I started creating a training manual for Kelly, a comprehensive guide to everything she'd need to know to do my job, except the information in it was strategically, carefully wrong. Not obviously wrong, not in ways that would be immediately apparent, but wrong enough that following it would create problems down the line. Wrong client preferences, incorrect process steps that would cause delays, outdated contact information, subtle sabotage that looked like honest mistakes or oversights. But that wasn't even the worst part. While I was preparing this manual, I started reaching out to our top 3 clients. Not to badmouth the company, nothing unprofessional. Just casual check-ins, mentioning that I was exploring new opportunities, asking if they'd be interested in continuing to work with me wherever I ended up. These were clients I'd built relationships with over years, clients who specifically requested me on projects, clients who trusted me. All 3 said yes immediately. They didn't care about the company, they cared about working with me, and when I told them I'd be starting at a competitor, they said they'd follow. Just like that, 3 of our biggest accounts ready to walk. Then came my termination meeting. My boss called me in, gave me some nonsense about restructuring and budget cuts, said my position was being eliminated. He thanked me for all my hard work and especially for being so helpful training Kelly. He actually said that with a straight face. Thanked me for making my own firing easier for him. I stayed calm, didn't argue, didn't cry. Just asked about severance, signed the paperwork, and started packing my desk. On my way out, I handed Kelly the training manual I'd created, told her it had everything she'd need, all my notes and processes compiled in one place. She thanked me, gave me a hug, said she hoped we'd stay in touch. The performance continued right until the end. My last day was a Friday. By Monday morning, I'd started at a new company. By Wednesday, all 3 of those major clients had formally terminated their contracts with my old employer and signed with my new one. My new boss was thrilled. I'd brought in more business in my first week than most people did in 6 months. Kelly, meanwhile, was drowning. Turned out that my job wasn't just following processes and managing timelines. It was relationships, institutional knowledge, understanding client personalities, and preferences in ways you can't write down in a manual. It was knowing when to push and when to back off, which battles to fight and which to let go. It was years of experience that you can't download into someone's brain in 4 months. She started making mistakes, missing deadlines, miscommunicating with clients, following the incorrect processes I'd documented in that manual, and creating cascading problems. My old boss tried to fix things, but he didn't understand the work well enough to course correct. The whole department started falling apart. 2 months after I left, my old boss called me, said there had been a misunderstanding, that they'd made a mistake letting me go, that they wanted me back. They'd match whatever my new company was paying, plus a raise. They needed me to fix the mess Kelly had made. I let him finish his pitch. Then I very politely declined, told him I was happy where I was, that I'd found a company that valued my contributions and paid me accordingly, that I had no interest in returning to a place that had fired me to save money and lied about the reasons. He tried arguing, said Kelly wasn't working out, that clients were asking for me specifically. I said that sounded like a problem he'd need to solve without me, and hung up. Kelly got fired about a month after that. I didn't feel bad. She'd known what she was signing up for. She'd taken a job specifically created to replace someone else, lied through her teeth for months, and pretended to be grateful while learning how to push me out. She thought she was getting a great opportunity. She ended up with a failed job on her resume and a reputation for not being able to handle responsibilities. My old boss tried reaching out a few more times, sent emails, left voicemails, even had HR contact me about consulting arrangements. I ignored all of it. You don't get to fire someone, realize you made a catastrophic mistake, and then expect them to bail you out. People have asked me if I regret sabotaging Kelly with that training manual, if I think it was too harsh. And honestly, no. She wasn't some innocent victim. She knew exactly what was happening. She could have warned me, could have refused to participate in something that unethical, could have had literally any moral backbone at all. Instead, she smiled to my face while preparing to take my job. The manual wasn't even the real problem. The real problem was that they thought my job was a checklist of tasks any warm body could complete. They didn't value the relationships, the experience, the problem-solving skills that came from years of doing the work. They reduced me to a line item they could replace with a cheaper option. And when that cheaper option couldn't deliver, they expected me to fix it. I'm thriving at my new company. Better pay, better culture, management that actually values what I bring to the table. My old employer is still struggling to replace the client revenue they lost when those 3 accounts followed me. Last I heard, they ended up hiring 2 people to do what I was doing alone, and they're still not managing it effectively. Mentorship can be weaponized, but sabotage gets even darker when evidence is planted against you. Files started disappearing from my work computer. At first, I thought it was just me being disorganized. Maybe I'd saved something in the wrong folder or accidentally deleted it. But then, it kept happening. Reports I'd finished would vanish. Emails I'd sent weren't in my sent folder. Deadlines I knew I'd met were suddenly being marked as missed in our project management system. My manager called me into her office to discuss my recent performance issues. I sat there completely confused while she listed off problems I had no memory of causing. Missed deadlines on 3 separate projects, unprofessional emails sent to clients, failure to complete tasks I'd been assigned. She showed me screenshots, forwarded emails, documentation of things I absolutely had not done. I tried explaining that something was wrong, that I hadn't missed those deadlines or sent those emails, but I sounded like I was making excuses. She put me on a performance improvement plan. Me, someone who'd been a top performer for 3 years, who'd gotten stellar reviews, who'd never had a single complaint. I left that meeting feeling like I was losing my mind. I started obsessively checking my work, saving everything twice, documenting every single thing I did just to prove I was actually doing it. But the problems kept happening. More files disappeared. More anonymous complaints came in about my attitude, my work ethic, my supposed rudeness to colleagues. Someone was systematically destroying my reputation, and I had no idea who or why. Then I started noticing Derek. He was a co-worker in my department, someone I'd always gotten along with fine, but wasn't particularly close to. He'd been asking weird questions lately, casual stuff about what password manager I used, whether I ever worked from home on my work computer, if I locked my screen when I stepped away from my desk. At the time, I didn't think much of it, just normal office small talk. But then I noticed he'd been staying late a lot, always seeming to be at his desk right near mine when I left for the day. I started putting pieces together. The problems had started around the same time Derek had begun acting strange. The questions about my computer security, the late nights near my desk. It felt paranoid to even think it. But what if he was doing something to my computer after I left? I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse someone without evidence, especially when I was already on thin ice with management. So I got creative. I installed a hidden camera app on my old phone, the one I'd replaced but still kept charged. I set it up on my desk, angled toward my computer, hidden behind some books and a picture frame. I left it recording overnight on a night when I knew Derek was planning to stay late. I told him I had a dinner I couldn't miss and left at 5:30, making sure my computer was unlocked, making it easy. The next morning, I checked the footage, and there he was. Derek, clear as day, sitting at my desk at 8 p.m. He logged into my computer, no password needed because I'd left it unlocked like an idiot who trusted her coworkers. Then he started deleting files, going through my project folders and removing completed work, opening my email and sending messages I'd never written, BCCing himself so he'd have copies, marking tasks as incomplete in our management system, leaving nasty comments on shared documents and attributing them to me. I watched the entire thing, 20 minutes of footage showing Derek methodically sabotaging my work. He wasn't even rushing. He looked calm, methodical, like he'd done this before. When he finished, he cleared the browser history, logged out, and went back to his own desk like nothing had happened. I had him. Complete video evidence of corporate sabotage, all time-stamped and undeniable. I made copies of the footage, backed it up in 3 different places, and went straight to HR first thing that morning. I also emailed it to my manager with a subject line that just said, "This is what's been happening." The HR meeting was quick. They watched the video, verified it was actually Derek in the footage, and called him in immediately. I wasn't in the room for that conversation, but I heard he tried to deny it at first, said the video was doctored, that I was framing him, that this was some kind of revenge plot. Then they pointed out that the footage clearly showed his face, his ID badge, the distinctive watch he wore every day. He crumbled pretty fast after that. Derek was fired on the spot, escorted out of the building by security that same afternoon. HR launched an investigation into how long this had been going on and how much damage he'd done. Turned out the sabotage had been happening for almost 4 months. Hundreds of deleted files, dozens of fake emails, countless hours of my work erased or corrupted. And here's where it gets absurd. The reason he'd done it? He wanted my senior position. There was a promotion coming up, and Derek had convinced himself he deserved it. But I was the obvious choice, the top performer with seniority and a track record. So he decided the best way to get the promotion was to destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I'd either get fired or demoted, clearing his path. Instead, he torpedoed his own career, got fired for cause, which meant no severance, no good reference, nothing. Word spread fast in our industry. It's not that big of a field, and people talk. Derek got blacklisted. I heard through the grapevine that he applied to 3 different companies and got rejected by all of them once they called for references and heard what happened. My manager apologized profusely. Said she should have questioned things more when my performance suddenly declined, should have investigated before putting me on a performance improvement plan. HR reversed everything, wiped my record clean, restored all the documentation of my actual work. They even hired a forensics team to recover the deleted files from backup servers. And the promotion Derek wanted so badly, I got it. 2 months after he was fired, they created the senior position and offered it to me. Better title, significant raise, my own office. Everything Derek thought he could get by sabotaging me ended up being mine anyway. People have asked me if I feel bad about getting Derek fired, if maybe I should have handled it differently, talked to him first, given him a chance to explain, and no, absolutely not. He didn't make one mistake in a moment of weakness. He executed a calculated months-long campaign to destroy my career. He sat at my desk and deleted my work with the same casual energy most people use to check their email. That's not someone who deserves a second chance. That's someone who showed exactly who they are when they think nobody's watching. The hidden camera was the best decision I ever made. Without that footage, I'd still be on a performance improvement plan, still questioning my own sanity, still wondering why everything I touched seemed to fall apart. Derek would have kept sabotaging me until I got fired or quit, and then he'd have moved on to whoever else stood between him and what he wanted. I keep the video saved, not to watch it or dwell on it, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the problem isn't you. Sometimes someone really is out to get you, and trusting your instincts and gathering evidence is the only way to protect yourself. And a reminder that karma works a lot faster when you have receipts. The whole experience changed how I think about workplace relationships. I'm more careful now, more aware. I lock my computer every single time I step away. I document everything. I don't share passwords or security information, even in casual conversation. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I learned the hard way that some people will absolutely exploit any vulnerability they can find. Derek tried reaching out once, months later, sent me a LinkedIn message saying he was sorry, that he'd made a huge mistake, asking if I'd be willing to give him a reference for a job he was applying for. The audacity was genuinely stunning. I blocked him without responding. Some apologies don't deserve acknowledgement, and some bridges should stay burned. I'm thriving now. The promotion came with new responsibilities I actually enjoy. Colleagues who respect my work, management that has my back, and every time I unlock my computer, I'm reminded that I fought for this, that I didn't let someone sabotage, destroy what I'd built, that I had the presence of mind to gather evidence and fight back. Sabotage is vicious, but it's even worse when the person supposed to protect you buries the truth. The project had been a disaster from the start. Budget cuts, unrealistic timelines, scope creep that would make your head spin. I'd raised concerns at every stage, documented every risk, sent warning after warning up the chain. My boss Greg had dismissed all of it, told me to make it work, said I was being too cautious. And when the whole thing imploded and cost the company millions, he threw me under the bus so fast I didn't see it coming. The email went out company-wide on a Thursday morning. Greg's message was clear, detailed, and completely fabricated. He claimed I'd ignored his directives, missed critical deadlines, and made unauthorized decisions that led to the project's failure. He painted me as incompetent, reckless, and insubordinate. My phone started blowing up immediately. Colleagues asking what happened. My team members confused because they'd seen me fighting against the decisions Greg was now claiming I'd made independently. I was called into HR that afternoon. They said they were launching an investigation, but made it pretty clear which way it was headed. Greg was a senior director. I was a project manager. The optics were obvious. Someone had to take the fall for millions in losses, and it wasn't going to be the guy who played golf with the VP. I went home that night feeling sick. My career was about to be destroyed because Greg needed a scapegoat. Everything I'd built, every relationship I'd cultivated, gone because one coward couldn't admit his own failures. I barely slept, just kept replaying the project timeline in my head, thinking about all the times I'd warned him this would happen. Then I remembered something. I'd kept everything. Every email, every meeting note, every Slack message. I'd even recorded some of our project calls because Greg had a habit of contradicting himself, and I wanted to keep my own record straight. My state was one-party consent for recordings, so it was all legal. I'd been documenting not because I expected to need it as evidence, but because Greg was so disorganized I needed a paper trail just to do my job. I spent all of Friday compiling everything, built a timeline with receipts, email from March where I warned the budget was insufficient, and Greg replied telling me to figure it out. Recording from April where I outlined 3 major risks, and Greg cut me off saying we'd deal with problems if they came up. Meeting notes from May where I requested additional resources, and Greg denied them to stay under budget. His written approval on decisions he was now claiming I'd made without authorization. The evidence was damning, not just proof that I'd done my job, but proof that Greg had made every single bad decision he was now blaming me for. He'd ignored expert warnings, cut corners to look good on budget reports, and prioritized short-term optics over project success, and I had documentation of all of it. Monday morning, I forwarded everything to the CEO, the entire board of directors, and CC'd the whole company. Same distribution list Greg had used to destroy my reputation. The email was professional, factual, and devastating. I laid out the timeline, attached the evidence, included audio clips of the most damning conversations, and provided Greg's written approvals with timestamps. I didn't editorialize, didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. The response was immediate. My inbox exploded. HR called me within 20 minutes asking me to come in. The CEO's assistant reached out requesting a meeting. Greg sent me a message that was equal parts threatening and panicked, demanding I retract the email and claiming I'd taken things out of context. But that wasn't even the worst part for him. The board launched an immediate investigation, and once they started looking into Greg's history, they found a pattern. Turned out I wasn't the first person he'd scapegoated. There were 2 other failed projects in the past 3 years where he'd blamed subordinates and walked away clean. The board had never connected the dots because the people he'd thrown under the bus had left quietly, too afraid or too defeated to fight back. I had receipts they didn't, and I'd made them public in a way that couldn't be swept under the rug. Greg was fired within 48 hours. The company issued a public apology to me, company-wide, admitted that I'd been wrongly accused, that the project failure was due to leadership decisions I'd actively opposed, and that they should have listened to my warnings. They offered me a promotion. Greg's old position, actually. Said they wanted someone with integrity in that role, someone who would speak truth to power even when it was uncomfortable. The audacity of that offer was almost funny. They'd been ready to fire me to protect Greg 3 days earlier. Now they wanted to promote me because I'd forced their hand. Like I was supposed to forget that they'd thrown me to the wolves the moment it was convenient. I declined, politely, professionally, but firmly. Told them I appreciated the apology, but I'd already accepted a position elsewhere. I'd been job hunting the moment Greg sent that first email because I knew how this would play out if I didn't have evidence. The new job was better anyway. Better pay, better title, better company culture, and no Greg. But I wasn't done. Greg's reputation in the industry needed to be what it actually was, not what he'd been pretending to be for years. I reached out to former colleagues he'd burned, connected them with each other. We didn't coordinate some revenge plot, but we did make sure that when Greg's name came up in professional circles, the truth came with it. Not rumors, not gossip, just facts about his pattern of mismanagement and scapegoating. He tried to land a few positions after getting fired. Each time, someone in the industry who knew the real story was in the room or connected to the hiring process. His reputation preceded him. Last I heard, he'd moved to a different city and taken a job well below his previous level. The kind of position where he couldn't do much damage because he didn't have enough authority. People asked me if I felt guilty about destroying his career, and honestly, no, he tried to destroy mine first. The only difference is I had evidence and he had lies. I didn't fabricate anything, didn't exaggerate, just presented the facts he thought he could bury by blaming someone else. The real lesson wasn't about revenge, it was about documentation. If I hadn't kept those emails, those recordings, those meeting notes, I would have been fired and blacklisted while Greg continued his pattern with the next unlucky project manager. The system was designed to protect people like him. The only reason it didn't work this time is because I'd accidentally built an airtight case just by doing my job thoroughly. My new company is great. My new boss actually listens when I raise concerns. Radical concept. When I warned about potential issues on my first major project there, they adjusted the timeline and added resources instead of telling me to figure it out. The project succeeded. Imagine that. I still have former colleagues from the old company reach out sometimes. They want to know how I did it, how I fought back and won. And I tell them the same thing every time. Document everything, keep records, cover your ass not because you're paranoid, but because someone will eventually try to make you the scapegoat for their failures. And when they do, you want to have proof that you saw it coming and tried to stop it. Greg taught me that lesson the hard way, and then I used it to end his career. Fair trade. When bosses betray you, it's bad. But when HR protects the abusers, the rot runs deeper. I reported sexual harassment by a senior manager named David. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't ambiguous. It was months of inappropriate comments, unwanted touching, messages sent after hours that made my skin crawl. I documented everything. Screenshots, dates, witnesses. I built a case that should have been open and shut. Then I went to HR like you're supposed to. The HR director, Patricia, listened to my complaint with what seemed like genuine concern. She took notes, nodded in all the right places, told me they took these matters very seriously. She said they'd launch an immediate investigation, that I should feel safe coming forward, that the company had a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. I left that meeting feeling like I'd done the right thing, like the system was going to work the way it was supposed to. Weeks passed, nothing happened. David was still in the office, still managing his team, still walking past my desk like nothing was wrong. I followed up with Patricia. She said the investigation was ongoing, that these things take time, that they needed to be thorough. I waited. More weeks passed. I followed up again. This time she said they'd completed the investigation and found no evidence to support my claims. No evidence. despite the screenshots, despite the witnesses, despite everything I'd given them. Then David got promoted, not quietly either. Company-wide email announcing his new role as Director of Operations. Congratulations from leadership. A celebration lunch that half the office attended. I sat at my desk reading that email, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. I'd reported him for harassment, and they'd rewarded him with a promotion. I felt invisible, worse than invisible. I felt like my experience had been actively erased, like I'd imagined the whole thing, like the evidence I'd carefully compiled meant nothing because the people in charge had decided it was easier to pretend I was lying than to hold someone accountable. I started looking for new jobs, figured I'd just leave quietly, cut my losses, move on. But then I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the next person David would harass, about how the company had shown him there were no consequences, about Patricia sitting in her office burying complaints and collecting a paycheck for protecting predators instead of employees. I started Googling the company name plus HR complaints, the company name plus sexual harassment, looking for anything that might tell me if I was the only one they'd done this to, and that's when I found it. A private forum for former employees, people sharing stories about toxic management, unfair practices, and buried HR complaints. I created an account and started reading. Patricia's name came up over and over. Different people, different years, same story. Complaints filed, investigations promised, evidence ignored, nothing done. There was a pattern going back at least 5 years. People reporting harassment, discrimination, retaliation, all of it disappearing into Patricia's office and never being heard from again. I reached out to 7 of them, sent private messages explaining my situation, asking if they'd be willing to compare notes. All 7 responded. We set up a video call and spent 3 hours going through our experiences. Different harassers, different circumstances, but the exact same HR response every single time. Patricia's playbook was consistent. Listen sympathetically, promise action, delay, claim insufficient evidence, protect the company and the harasser at the expense of the victim. One woman had reported her manager for racial discrimination. Another had filed a complaint about being passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified men. Someone else had reported financial misconduct and been told they were mistaken about what they'd seen. Every single one of us had been gaslit, dismissed, and ultimately pushed out of the company while the people we'd reported faced 0 consequences. We hired a lawyer together, pooled resources and found someone who specialized in employment law and had experience with class action cases. She reviewed our documentation and said we had a solid case, not just against the individuals who'd harassed or discriminated against us, but against the company for systematic failure to address complaints and creating a hostile work environment. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. We filed a joint complaint with the State Labor Board, detailed everything, names, dates, evidence, the pattern of HR burying complaints. We also went to the media. Local news picked it up first, then it went regional, then national. Former employees coming forward together to expose corporate corruption. The story had legs. The company's stock dropped within 48 hours. Not a huge crash, but enough that investors noticed. Enough that the board of directors couldn't ignore it. The PR department went into crisis mode, issued statements about taking the allegations seriously and conducting internal reviews. But the damage was done. More former employees started coming forward with their own stories. The pattern was undeniable. Patricia was fired within a week. Escorted out of the building by security, her entire department put under review. 3 executives who'd been CC'd on various complaint emails over the years and done nothing also got terminated. The company tried to claim they were shocked, that they'd had no idea this was happening, that these individuals had been acting against company policy. Classic corporate cover-up language. David, my original harasser, was fired and faced legal charges. Turns out once the floodgates opened, multiple women came forward with complaints about him. The company couldn't protect him anymore, not with lawyers and journalists watching every move. He tried to sue for wrongful termination. It went nowhere. I left the company before any of this fully resolved. Couldn't stay in that building, couldn't work for people who'd allowed this to happen for years. But the lawsuit settlement gave me financial breathing room I'd never had before. Enough to take time finding the right next job instead of just taking the first offer out of desperation. enough to pay off debt and build savings, enough to feel like the nightmare had at least resulted in something tangible. The settlement came with an NDA, so I can't discuss specific numbers or terms, but I can say it was enough to make starting over feel possible instead of terrifying. And honestly, the money wasn't even the most important part. The most important part was being believed. Having other people say, yes, this happened to me too, and we're going to do something about it together. People ask if I regret going public instead of just leaving quietly, if I think it was worth the stress and the legal battles and the media attention. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Because Patricia's gone. The executives who enabled her are gone. The company's HR practices are under a microscope now. Future employees might actually get their complaints taken seriously because we made it too expensive and too public for the company to keep burying them. But that wasn't even the worst part of the whole situation. The worst part was learning how long it had been going on. 5 years minimum of complaints being systematically ignored. How many people had suffered because Patricia decided her job was to protect the company's reputation instead of its employees? How many careers were derailed? How much trauma was inflicted? How many harassers were emboldened because they learned there were no consequences? There's this idea that you should trust the system, file your complaint, let HR handle it, believe that institutions will do the right thing. But institutions are just people making decisions, and when those people decide that protecting their budget and their executives is more important than protecting employees, the system doesn't work. It becomes a mechanism for covering up problems instead of solving them. Going public was scary. I had nightmares about being sued, about retaliation, about my career being destroyed, but staying silent felt worse. Felt like accepting that what happened to me didn't matter, that the next person David harassed was just the cost of keeping my head down and my paycheck steady. The 7 of us who filed together stayed in touch. We have a group chat where we check in, share job updates, celebrate wins. We built something real out of that shared trauma. Not friendship exactly, but solidarity. The knowledge that we didn't face this alone, that our experiences were valid, that fighting back was worth it even when it was hard. I'm at a new company now. Better culture, better management, HR that actually seems to function the way it's supposed to. When they asked in my interview if I had any questions, I asked about their complaint process, how they handle harassment allegations, what accountability looks like. The HR director didn't get defensive or give me corporate talking points. She walked me through their actual process, gave me examples of situations they'd handled, was transparent about their successes and failures. It felt like a conversation with a human instead of a script. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to expose the truth. The company survived, rebuilt their HR department, implemented new policies, but they only did it because we forced them to, because we made the cost of inaction higher than the cost of change. That's the math that corporations understand. Not morality, not ethics, just consequences. Institutions can fail you, but so can the people you trust most, especially when they sell your secrets. I told Mia everything. That's what best friends do, right? We'd known each other since we were 7 years old. She was the person I called when life fell apart, when I needed to vent, when something amazing happened. She knew about my anxiety, my messy breakup, the complicated relationship with my parents, the therapy I was finally brave enough to start. I trusted her with pieces of myself I didn't show anyone else. Mia had become a lifestyle influencer over the past few years. Started small with fashion posts, then grew into this whole wellness and personal growth brand. I was happy for her, proud even. She'd built something from nothing, had sponsors, brand deals, tens of thousands of followers who hung on her every word. I never thought twice about the content she posted. Why would I? She was my best friend. Then I started noticing things, little details in her posts that felt familiar. She'd share a story about overcoming anxiety, and the specifics would match a conversation we'd had 2 weeks earlier. She'd post about healing from a toxic relationship, and the timeline would line up exactly with my breakup. At first, I thought it was coincidence. We were close, we went through things together. Maybe our experiences just naturally overlapped. But the details were too specific. The therapy exercises I'd told her about appeared in her wellness content. The exact phrases I'd used to describe my struggles showed up in her captions. Stories about my childhood trauma got repackaged as her journey of self-discovery. She'd twist the details just enough to make them hers, position herself as the hero who'd overcome these challenges, and never once mentioned that she was talking about my life, not hers. I kept screenshots, started paying closer attention. Every vulnerable conversation we had would show up in her content within days. My private pain became her engagement strategy. My real struggles became her brand authenticity. And her followers ate it up, left comments about how brave she was, how inspiring, how real and relatable. When I finally confronted her, we were having coffee at her apartment. I pulled up examples on my phone, showed her posts next to our text conversations, pointed out how she'd taken my stories and presented them as her own. I asked her why she was doing this, why she thought it was okay to use my life for content without even asking. She barely looked at the phone, just shrugged and said, "It's just content." Like that explained everything. Like my trauma was just raw material for her personal brand. She said I was being dramatic, that influencers pull inspiration from their lives all the time, that nothing she posted was technically a lie. When I pushed back, she got defensive, said I should be grateful she was using her platform to help people, that my experiences were reaching thousands and making a difference, as if exploiting my pain was somehow charitable. I left that conversation feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. 20 years of friendship and she'd reduced me to content, a resource to mine for engagement metrics. I didn't confront her publicly right away. I sat with it for a few days, trying to process the betrayal. Part of me wanted to just walk away, cut her off, move on. But another part of me was furious. She'd built this image of authenticity and vulnerability by stealing my authenticity and vulnerability. Her followers thought they knew her, thought she was brave for sharing her struggles. They had no idea they were watching her monetize someone else's trauma. So I decided to play her game, but with one crucial difference. I was going to tell the truth. I created my own account. Nothing fancy, no influencer aesthetics, just a place to tell my story. My real story. I started posting about my actual experiences, the ones Mia had been repackaging, but I included screenshots, our private text conversations where I'd confided in her, dated and timestamped, next to her posts that had clearly pulled from those exact conversations. I didn't accuse her directly in the captions. I just laid out the evidence and let people draw their own conclusions. The response was immediate. People started connecting the dots, realized her most popular content wasn't actually about her life. They went back through her posts with fresh eyes, saw the patterns, noticed how her stories never quite added up. Comment sections filled with questions. Where did these stories really come from? Why were the details changing? Was any of this actually real? And here's where it gets absurd. Mia's initial response was to double down. She posted a tearful video about bullying and jealousy, about how success brings out the worst in people, how she was being attacked by someone who couldn't handle her growth. She didn't name me, but her followers knew. They'd seen my account, they'd seen the screenshots, and most of them weren't buying her victim narrative anymore. Then her sponsors started asking questions. Authenticity is currency in the influencer world, and she'd just been exposed as someone who fabricated her authentic content. Brands don't want to be associated with that. 3 major sponsors dropped her within a week. Her follow count started declining. The comments on her posts shifted from supportive to skeptical to outright hostile. She tried to apologize, posted a public statement about how she'd been inspired by a close friend's journey and should have been more transparent about her sources. Reached out privately begging me to take down my posts, saying I was ruining her career, that she'd made a mistake but didn't deserve to lose everything over it. She offered to credit me, to do a collaboration, to share revenue from future posts. Like this was a business negotiation instead of a friendship she'd destroyed. I didn't take down anything. I didn't respond to her messages. Because here's the thing she didn't seem to understand. This wasn't about her career or her sponsors or her follower count. This was about 20 years of trust that she'd burned through in 20 seconds every time she decided my pain was worth more as content than as a confidence between friends. She'd sat across from me at coffee shops, on couches, in cars, and listened to me share the hardest parts of my life. And instead of holding those stories with care, she'd immediately started calculating how to monetize them. That's not a mistake. That's a fundamental betrayal of what friendship is supposed to mean. The comments on my posts were overwhelmingly supportive. People shared their own stories of influencers they'd trusted who turned out to be selling carefully constructed lies. Others talked about friends who'd betrayed their confidence in smaller ways. The whole thing sparked this larger conversation about authenticity online, about the difference between sharing your story and stealing someone else's. Mia's account never recovered. She tried pivoting to different content, rebranding, starting fresh, but the internet has a long memory. Screenshots of her fake authenticity circulated for months. She became a cautionary tale. Eventually, she deleted the account entirely and disappeared from social media. People asked me if I felt guilty, if I thought I'd gone too far by exposing her publicly instead of handling it privately. And honestly, I'd tried handling it privately. I'd given her the chance to explain, to apologize, to make it right. She'd chosen to dismiss my pain as just content, so I chose to show everyone exactly what kind of content she'd been creating. I still have the account up, mostly dormant now, but I haven't deleted it. It's a record of what happened, proof that I'm not the villain in whatever story Mia tells herself about why her influencer career imploded. She spent 20 years collecting my secrets, and 20 seconds at a time turning them into commodities. I spent 1 week showing the truth. The friendship is done. You can't come back from that kind of betrayal. She didn't just use my stories. She reduced my entire life to engagement metrics, made my worst moments into her most successful posts, and when confronted, she couldn't even understand why that was wrong. Friends can betray you quietly, but when lies spread like wildfire, sometimes you have to fight fire with truth. Rumors started spreading at work that I'd slept with a married executive to get my promotion. I first heard about it from a colleague who pulled me aside in the break room, asked if I was okay, said people were talking. I had no idea what she meant. Then she told me what they were saying, and I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. The story going around was that I'd had an affair with David, one of the VPs, and that's how I'd gotten promoted to senior manager. It was detailed, specific, included supposed sightings of us together at hotels, late-night meetings that never happened, a whole narrative that sounded almost believable if you didn't know it was completely fabricated. I was engaged, planning a wedding. I'd earned that promotion through 3 years of 60-hour weeks, successful project launches, and measurable results. David was happily married with kids, professional to a fault, someone I'd barely interacted with outside of normal work contexts. The rumor was vicious and entirely false, but it was spreading fast. The whispers followed me everywhere. Conversations would stop when I walked into rooms. People looked at me differently, some with judgment, some with pity, all of it making my skin crawl. I tried ignoring it, tried rising above it, but the rumor had legs. It kept growing, getting more elaborate, picking up fake details that made it sound more credible. Then my fiancé started asking questions. Had I been working late with David? Why hadn't I mentioned him before? Were the rumors true? I could see the doubt in his eyes, and it destroyed me. We'd been together for 5 years, and he was actually questioning whether I'd cheated my way into a promotion. The fact that he even considered it might be true felt like a betrayal. I was crumbling. The professional reputation I'd spent years building was disintegrating. My personal relationship was suffering, and I had no idea how to fight back against something so insidious. How do you prove a negative? How do you definitively show that something didn't happen when people want to believe it did? I started digging, asked around carefully, trying to figure out where the rumor had originated. Most people claimed they'd just heard it from someone else, that it was already circulating when they became aware of it. But eventually, I traced it back to a source, Vanessa, a co-worker who'd also applied for the promotion I'd gotten. Vanessa and I had been friendly before. Not close, but cordial. We'd worked on projects together, grabbed lunch occasionally, normal co-worker stuff. She'd seemed genuinely happy for me when I got promoted, or at least that's what I'd thought at the time. Turns out it was all performance. She'd been rejected for the promotion, and instead of accepting it or working to improve for next time, she'd decided to destroy me. If she couldn't have the position, she'd make sure everyone believed I hadn't earned it either. The affair rumor was her creation, spread strategically to people she knew would talk, designed to discredit everything I'd accomplished. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found proof completely by accident. A mutual colleague added me to a group chat for planning someone's going away party. Vanessa was in the chat and didn't realize I'd been added. She made a comment about how her plan was working, how people were actually believing the story about me and David, how satisfying it was to watch me squirm. I took screenshots of everything: her admission that she'd started the rumor, her laughing about the damage it was causing, her strategizing with others about how to keep it alive. It was all there, time-stamped and undeniable. She'd handed me everything I needed to destroy her credibility. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I went straight to HR and requested a formal meeting. I invited David, the executive she'd dragged into her lie, and insisted that Vanessa be present as well. HR was hesitant at first, but when I told them I had evidence of deliberate defamation and harassment, they agreed. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I spent that time preparing, organizing my evidence, making sure I had everything documented. Screenshots of the group chat messages, a timeline of when the rumors started relative to the promotion announcement, statements from people who'd heard Vanessa spreading the story. I built a case that was airtight. When we all sat down in that conference room, Vanessa looked nervous but tried to play it cool. She probably thought I was going to make some emotional plea about how the rumors were hurting me. She had no idea what was coming. I presented everything methodically, showed the screenshots of her admitting to starting the rumor, explained how she deliberately spread false information about me and David to damage both our reputations, pointed out that her motive was clear: she'd been rejected for the promotion and wanted revenge. David looked furious. HR looked horrified, and Vanessa went pale. She tried to backtrack immediately, said it was a joke, that she'd been venting in frustration but hadn't actually spread any rumors, that the group chat messages were taken out of context. But the evidence didn't support any of that. Multiple people confirmed hearing the rumor directly from her. The timeline was clear. Her own words in the chat contradicted her denials. And here's where it gets absurd. She pivoted to claiming I was the real problem, that I'd been flaunting my relationship with David, that she was just repeating what she'd observed. It was a desperate last attempt to shift blame, and it fell completely flat. David shut that down instantly, provided his own timeline showing we'd barely interacted, offered to have his wife speak to HR if needed. Vanessa's story collapsed under the weight of actual facts. HR terminated her employment that day, fired for defamation, creating a hostile work environment, and deliberately sabotaging a colleague's reputation. They sent a company-wide email clarifying that the rumors about me were false, that they'd identified and addressed the source, and that they had zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. My name was cleared publicly and officially. My fiancé apologized when I told him what had happened. He felt terrible for doubting me, for letting the rumors get into his head. It took time to rebuild that trust, but we worked through it. We're married now, and he knows better than to question my integrity based on office gossip. Vanessa's career tanked. Word spread in our industry about why she'd been fired. Professional circles are smaller than people think, and reputation matters. She struggled to find work, and when she did, it was always a step down from where she'd been. The lie she'd created to hurt me ended up destroying her own future. I stayed at the company and thrived, got another promotion 2 years later, built a team I'm proud of, maintained the reputation I'd worked so hard to earn. David and I are still professional colleagues, and he's been a strong advocate for me ever since, probably feeling some responsibility for being unwillingly dragged into the situation. People have asked if I feel bad about getting Vanessa fired, if maybe I should have just confronted her privately, given her a chance to stop before escalating to HR. And no, she didn't make an offhand comment she regretted. She executed a deliberate, sustained campaign to destroy my reputation and career. She laughed about it in group chats. She watched me suffer and felt satisfied. That's not someone who deserves a gentle private conversation. That's someone who showed exactly who they are and earned exactly what they got. The experience taught me that documentation is everything. If I hadn't been accidentally added to that group chat, if I hadn't taken screenshots immediately, it would have been much harder to prove what she'd done. The rumors might have lingered indefinitely, always a shadow over my accomplishments. But I had receipts, and receipts are the difference between your word against theirs and undeniable proof. The truth did win, but it took time and effort. It didn't magically surface on its own. I had to fight for it, gather evidence, present it strategically. Vanessa's lies were powerful because she'd crafted them carefully and spread them through trusted channels. Defeating them required being smarter, more prepared, and more committed to the facts than she was to the fiction. I keep those screenshots saved, not because I dwell on what happened, but as a reminder that some people will try to tear you down when they can't build themselves up, a reminder that the truth is worth fighting for, even when it's exhausting, and a reminder that karma works best when you give it a detailed paper trail and a formal HR complaint. The truth always wins, even when it takes time. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, the truth might take time to surface, but it's always stronger than the lies people build. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the Chaos Crew. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments which story hit the hardest. Tomorrow, we've got even wilder tales waiting. Until then, rest easy, stay curious, and never underestimate the power of receipts. Good night.